Welcome everybody at the Atelier for Solidarity Day 4, an initiative of the Festival Academy, which is initiated by the European Festivals Association. We set up this atelier in response to COVID-19, and we are with a group for 7 days of about 80 people. I see Yannick making a sign, I don't know. If something, no? Okay. We're here with a group of around 80 people, curators, artists, festival managers, and people from other sectors to reimagine our world together. I'm very happy to announce our next panel. This is the second panel that we have on this topic today, how to organize an online festival, with Kate Craddock, who is the artistic director of the Gateshead International Festival of Theatre, and who is also an alumni of the Festival Academy. And Vincent, and he has a very difficult last name, de Repentigny, who is the artistic and general director of OFFTA Montreal in Canada. Mike van Graan, South African playwright, will facilitate conversation. So the floor is all yours.
Great, well, welcome. As Inge said, to the second panel on the subject, and it's really the good, the bad, and the ugly. What worked, what didn't work, what would you repeat, what would you keep as part of your future festivals, and what not. So there are just two of you presenting today, so you have about 15 minutes or so to present, and then afterwards we'll have a bit of a conversation and see how it goes. But thank you again for being here. And Kate, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Mike, and thank you to Inge and to everybody for inviting me to speak on the panel today. It's a real privilege to kind of come back and to reconnect with a number of people as part of the Festival Academy, so thank you. So my name's Kate Craddock, and I run a festival, as Inge said, called GIFT, Gateshead International Festival of Theatre, and it's based in the northeast of England. So Gateshead is just next to, or pretty much attached to, a city called Newcastle upon Tyne that some people might have heard of. So the festival is one that I actually set up myself. So I founded the festival in 2011, and I set the festival up very much to respond to a gap in the kind of cultural offer in the region, to try to do something that would bring more experimental and contemporary performance and theatre practices to the northeast that are kind of underrepresented in that area. And I also wanted to do something at that point that was very much about responding to a location that was in transition. So the town centre of Gateshead, where a lot of the festival first took place and where a lot of the events would happen, was very much in transition. It was being knocked down, it was being rebuilt, there were lots of empty shops. And I was part of a group of artists who were sort of all put into and offered an artist studio space on Gateshead High Street in a disused bed shop. So I kind of was in this bed shop getting kind of inspiration for what might be possible. And so GIFT was kind of founded in a very specific location and responding to a very specific gap. And because of that, at the core of GIFT, there's always been experimentation, I suppose, at the heart of it, as well as trying to bring artists and audiences together in ways that are maybe surprising or unexpected. So a lot of the performance work that we present happens in unusual spaces, so not necessarily in a theatre. In fact, there isn't a theatre. We don't program in a theatre at all, so we have events happening in all sorts of locations. So just to give you a little bit of background, it feels like that's important to kind of say some of those things, really, because that's important kind of context. In terms of the sort of structure of GIFT, we would always have events that would be free to access alongside ticketed events. So there might be a kind of an event that would pop up in the train station where all sorts of people, members of the public, would engage alongside a programme of work that would happen in a ticketed venue. Over the last 3 years, we've developed a really close relationship with a contemporary art gallery in Gateshead. So there's been a lot of regeneration down on the riverside in Newcastle Gateshead, on the Gateshead side of the river, and there's a beautiful gallery there called the Baltic Centre for Contemporary Art, and that's been one of our kind of key partners over the last 3 years. And so we've been presenting work in that kind of gallery context, as well as in the pub or in the train station or in an empty shop or in a beautiful kind of performance space above the local library. So community spaces, as well as kind of public spaces and gallery spaces are the spaces that we would normally occupy. But we'd already made this decision. It was interesting, I watched the panel discussion this morning, very early, 12 hours ago, and Jeff was there talking a lot about Fusebox and talking about the model of Fusebox. And I've been really inspired developing a relationship with Fusebox over the last couple of years, and have been very inspired by their model of making the whole festival free. And I think because because such a small portion actually of Gift's income had been through ticket sales previously, we'd already decided to make our festival this year in the real world a pay what you decide festival. So we'd made certain decisions about what was going to happen with Gift this year prior to going online. And that's quite important because I think that kind of gives some background and context to some of the decisions we stuck to or kept with as we moved our festival online. Gift, it's worth saying, is project funded. So we are funded on a project by project basis. We have no kind of core team other than me year round, kind of trying to make it happen and keep it alive, applying for funding, etc. And then I bring in a fantastic team of freelancers to realize the festival with me. So when the pandemic hit and when we were suddenly all in this situation, and I started to realize that artists were not going to be able to travel to perform the works. I had things in the program that I knew there was going to be no way we were going to be able to present them. Lots of the work that I'd programmed was kind of intimate, site responsive work. It involved large kind of groups of participants. There was one piece that was hopefully going to involve up to 150 people kissing in public. So it was kind of like, I couldn't stick to this program anymore. It was becoming quite clear that things were going to have to change. So I made the decision in March, basically, that, what am I going to do? But I kept in conversation with the artists all along around what the various possibilities were, which at the time were to cancel, to postpone, to go online. There were a number of possibilities and ways we could have gone. And what I put to the artists was, do you want to kind of go a little bit further in terms of the experimentation with your practice? So all of the artists that I would always program in Gift are always people who I talk about being interested in pushing at the parameters of their practice, whatever their practice might be. So people who are interested in embracing experimentation and interested in kind of going with me on a journey in terms of where their work might be programmed and the context that it be experienced in with audiences. So when I put this to the artists as a possibility of moving the work online, I think I'd already reached a stage with the conversations where there was a lot of trust probably already established. And also what helped with that as well was I have a history as a theatre maker using Skype as a tool to enable collaboration. So I founded a company a number of years ago with my collaborator Lynette Moran, who runs a festival called Live Collision in Dublin, which is another festival you should all look up. And we had a company from 2005 called Mouth to Mouth, and we were making work using Skype, using this kind of technology with people who were dispersed around the world. So it was something that was kind of native to me in that sense, in that it was something I was used to. It's a medium I felt comfortable and confident with, and would embrace the failure. So I wasn't afraid of it failing because I knew that that was probably going to happen, and that. And I think that that's a really important thing to keep hold of. That a festival's never going to run smoothly, but you put it online and that you're really going to be up against it. But that really helped in terms of the conversations with artists. And it was also that in those conversations with artists, I didn't say that we had to put exactly what they were going to perform online, and that actually that was a negotiation and a conversation. And so for some artists it made sense, and they really embraced the idea of kind of presenting exactly the same work but in this online context. And for others they said, okay, well, what we were going to do at GIFT this year won't work at all, so what we'll do is something else, and they would have another piece of work that they either had pre-existing or that they were working on. They saw it as an opportunity to test something out with an audience. So yeah, so I think those sorts of things around kind of building trust with artists and building trust with audiences were really key to how we wanted to frame moving online. And also being open to not prescribing with the artists how that work would sit online, like what platform. You know, we did a lot of experimentation with various platforms. A lot of the live performance work took place very much like this through Zoom, but then we also had things like audio work. So there was sort of a 24-hour durational radio station from Action Hero. We had a 14-hour durational performance that happened on Zoom. We had one-on-one works on Zoom. So it was quite broad in terms of how the program manifests online. So yeah, so the things that we really wanted to keep hold of were this sense of GIFT being a place normally where artists come together. They look forward to it, certainly I think in the Northeast, as an opportunity for them to take part in workshops, to meet people they wouldn't normally have an opportunity to connect with. And so there's always been a sort of drive around professional development or artist development, I suppose, as well as a part of, sorry if you can hear background noises, it's my son. So yeah, so there was, so this sense of kind of community is always really core to GIFT and what we try and achieve. So it's like, how do you move that sense of community that's always so important from the real world into an online context? What steps do you need to take? And I think all those questions are really key when you're kind of thinking about moving something online, in terms of asking yourself, well, what's the ethos of what I do? Why am I doing it? Who am I doing it for? I mean, they're obvious things that we need to be asking ourselves all the time, but it felt really pertinent with this kind of shift to moving online. So we were very, very keen to kind of keep this sense of a community of artists, a community of audiences, and a temporary festival community. So we made the decision to run the festival exactly as we would have over the 3 days. So it took place from the 1st of May to the 3rd of May. And we ticketed the events, but we kept them as we had decided, as pay what you decide. And there were a number of reasons for ticketing the events. Firstly, we had to ticket some of them because they were for limited capacity audiences, because the artist had prescribed and said, no, I want this piece for 30 people, or this piece for one person at a time, and then other reasons were, well, we only had a certain number of accounts with Zoom, with webinars, so we could only up to a certain number of people, for example. So we were also in some instances capped by the technology. But in other instances, we spoke very clearly to the artists about wanting to protect their work. And that was something that, again, underpinned a lot of the decisions we made, because it felt really important to us that the artists weren't going to be compromised in any way by putting their work out online, and that work would still be protected in the way it would if they were presenting it in Gateshead. So if they were presenting it in Gateshead, maybe it would have an audience of, I don't know, one show might have attracted 150 people, say. So it felt really important that actually that was reflected in terms of the numbers we put out online. And so we made an agreement with all of the artists about how many audience members could access each of their shows, with the hope that work will then also go on and have a life in the real world rather than live streaming it. Other decisions we made were around platforms. We kind of kept it separate from kind of live streaming from Facebook and YouTube and things, so that it did feel like it was contained. Audience members felt like they were being encouraged to buy a ticket, or not buy a ticket, make a donation. So to book a ticket and make a donation if they could, or if they wanted to, as part of the pay what you decide scheme. But that also helped, I think, in terms of the psychology of going to a festival. And we were at a very particular moment in the pandemic when people, I think, were ready for something. So I think timing was so key. I think if we'd come a bit earlier, or even if we'd come a bit later, then we might not have had the success we did. But I think that people were very ready at that moment for experiencing something, and willing to kind of go with us, and willing to kind of forgive the homemade feel of the whole thing. I've actually still got this sign that I made. So I had this is very unprofessional, had this sign up behind me, you know, which is my homemade gift sign. And I mean, that kind of gives a sense of a feel, I think, of the festival in some ways. Yeah, so I'm sure we'll talk a bit more around like the figures and things like that, but we did reach an audience all around the world in a way that we could never have imagined. We didn't expect that. It was a real surprise for us. And we've been really surprised by how people found out about it as well, you know, around the mainly kind of word of mouth, you know, people sort of spreading this news, or you should look this up. And basically after the festival, we were then inundated with requests for how did you do it? What did you do? What steps did you take? And which again was really, really quite overwhelming. And we've had lots of follow-up conversations. I'm still having them kind of on a daily basis actually with people, which is brilliant. But we also decided to do something that was opening out our process to the sector. So we hosted a webinar 2 weeks after Gift, which kind of did some of what I'm doing now, which was just talked about our experience of moving the festival online. So it wasn't this is how to do it. It was this is what we did, and take from that what you will. I'm obviously now in that place where I'm kind of reflecting on what worked for us, what didn't work. Working online was something, as I said, it was something that had been part of my artistic practice. It was also something I wrote my PhD about. So I wrote my PhD on kind of working collaboratively using these kind of tools. So it was something that was very much part of me. And then one of the other team members I brought in, a brilliant guy in Manchester called Jason Crouch, who also wrote his PhD quite recently on kind of on digital intimacy and one-on-one performance work using this kind of technology. So I think that we had a very core team with a certain skill set that we could bring to the project. And also I'd been building these kind of panel conversations into Gift over the last couple of years. So actually last year at Gift, I had a Zoom event as part of the festival. So I had a one-off event using Zoom, and lots of people in the room were like, this is amazing, because suddenly we had artists and curators from all over the world part of that. And that was something I'd wanted to build on. I just hadn't imagined that I would build on it to the extent where the whole festival would be in that realm. So I think that now moving forward, I feel like the digital side of things or the online side of things will stay. But I don't know exactly how that's going to manifest yet. I've got some ideas that we can tease out when in questions, and I'm happy to talk more about. But yeah, that's my kind of overview. Is that okay, Mike? Have I spoken for long enough? I feel like I've spoken for a very long time.
Yeah, no, that's been great. And I think probably you've inspired a few PhDs here as well. So if anybody wants to do a PhD on this particular atelier, you'd be very welcome to contact Inge and Yannick and Rebecca. Well, thank you very much. And we will come back to tease out some of the things that you've raised, Kate, but we'll have a listen to Vincent.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Kate, for sharing. First, I want to acknowledge that I'm located on unceded indigenous lands. The Kanengeaga Nation is recognized as the custodians of the lands and waters on which I am today. Tiohtià:ke Moniwong is historically known as a gathering place for many First Nations, and we totally embrace that role in the festival now. So just first of all, I want to share with you a bit more the history of the organization, because we are doing the OFFTA, that is mainly the of Festival Transamérique that you might know. I see Jean-René is here with us today as part of the team. And so we are mainly presenting with this festival the emerging artists of Montreal, Quebec, and Canada during the Festival Transamérique. But since 5 years, we've created La Serre Art Vivant, that is a structure coming from the festival that is really a place to help the artists throughout the process of creating their first pieces, working in residency, trying to create new ways of working on different levels. And I'm talking about that because it's been really an important part of, I think, the way we looked at the festival this year. This ecosystem that we tried to create a couple of years ago, that is partly the festival, but not only the festival, is really about I mean, Kate, you talked about trust, conversations, you know, these things were really embedded in the way we work on a daily basis with the team, and I think it's part of the success of what we did this year. So the OFFTA is it was the 14th edition of the OFFTA. Each year it's at the same moment than the FTA. Mainly like they start and we follow a couple of days later after that. The idea is really so we do a call for projects mainly on the local level, and we have a committee that selects between 15 and 20 projects each year. We add to that many conversation, professional ones, but also within the community of the artists and with different sector, because we have really that mandate of creating intersectional, you know, conversation. So between the artist and different sector of activities here in Montreal. OFFTA is a special place because it's always been a place of hybrid forms, a bit like Kate talked with Gift. I mean, the idea is really, so we're more on a local level, but we really try to create meetings between different disciplines and communities. So mainly theater, dance, performance, you know, live art forms. We try to be really a place where we can work with the artists to create the best context to present their piece, because it's partly, I mean, a local way of showing the work, but there's many professionals and presenters from around the world that are in town at that moment and that can discover their work. So we really try to work with them to be sure that the work is ready. That's one of the philosophy that we have all the, you know, the way we work with Lasser on each and different levels. So when everything happened, I mean, at the end of mid-March, we were 2 weeks prior to the unveiling of the program. Almost everything was ready. We were sending, you know, our program to the printer, and we were ready to unveil the program of, I mean, 22 different performances. And I remember at the first time we were reading this with the team yesterday, and the feeling of, you know, it will be only 14 days, and we'll be back and we'll do stuff, and, you know, this feeling that will be really momentary. And but after a couple of days, we really felt that it will be longer than that, and we felt the responsibility to be able to challenge the context. One of the things that have been really important is the fact that we always have, it's not a team, but a way to look at the program. And this year was about time. So the notion of time and how we can play with it. So the festival was planned from May 22nd to May 32nd. And so we tried to invent a new day, you know, to create a place that could be challenging, you know, our relation to the way we structure time. And so we felt that the context was so interesting to challenge these questions and to see how we could help the artist. Our first really, I mean, the first reflex was about solidarity with the artist. We know that the communities that we work with are really precarious in different ways. Mainly, I mean, everybody needs to, you know, have many incomes in on different levels. So we wanted to be sure that we would be there for them. So the first thing we did is, after 2 days, I think we sent an email to all the artists of the program saying, we'll be there, we'll do something. We don't know what it will be, but we'll do something. It might be only conversation, and we'll pay you for it. We'll try to find a way to be there with you inside this context. And after a couple of days, you know, I think we all felt that feeling of being overwhelmed by all the content online. And so we said to ourselves, how can we, you know, challenge this idea of live through some online content, of course, but also in a distanciation context. So with pieces that will, you know, challenge the context of not being together in the same space. So after that, we tried really to have really meaningful conversation with each and every artist. 7 of them decided not to present in the festival for different reasons, and we totally respected that. It was for us really important that they felt comfortable to have, you know, a need or desire to challenge their practice or their work in that context. 15 of them decided to try to see how they could challenge it. So it became really and I think that's one of the things that we really want to acknowledge, the capacity of the artist to be able to think about their project and the practice in another and new, totally new way. And it's been really interesting to have this conversation. And that's why I was talking about trust, you know, a bit earlier. I think I felt that we were trusting the artist and they were trusting us, and that relation was, you know, on the same level, and that what was really important the way we built it. So, proposing ways of seeing the work, how could it be, what could be the right tool to do it, and so some of them were, of course, on Zoom, some of them were on live Facebook, but also we had some of them that were you know, scores. Choreographic scores that people could experience in the streets in Montreal. One of the work was really it was an audio work done to be walking inside Place des Arts in Montreal, holding the hand of someone else, and the artist created that piece, but you could experience it in your own neighborhood. And at first, she was not really interested about doing, you know, this kind of work, because she was saying that it was so much about, you know, this proximity, but the piece was about. You know, she lost her dad a couple of years ago that died in that same spot. And at the moment where a lot of people were losing important people around them, she felt that the work was so much relevant that it would need to be, you know, addressed, even though some of the part was missing. So I think our conversations with the different artists was really about what is the necessity of the work? Where do you feel that we need to empower these elements to be sure that they're going to be heard in different ways? And I'm so glad that, I mean, and I'm talking about the artists, but also all the partners of the festival. I mean, we're normally in around 8 to 10 different venues inside the city. So they were really able to understand the context in which we were working. And it was really, I mean, helpful to feel a form of solidarity around us during that time. The other important element, and you talked about it, Kate, is about accessibility. So we're big fans too of Fusebox for a couple of years and their models. So we were planning to also to find a way of implementing that inside the way we look at the festival. And we felt that the artist was taking such a huge risk that it was really important that the audience would be in the same, you know, posture, that they will be ready to attend that risk with the artist, and not only, you know, paying a ticket and be on the relation of being pleased by the work or not. It was more about, you know, sharing that moment. So what we did is that we created a pass for all the festival that was totally free. So it was the accessible pass. People could take that pass. But they could also give $25 or $50, depending on the amount of money that they could put in the festival. So it really changed the way we approach the relation with the audience and the artist, because the idea was more of creating that you know, that relation between them than really trying to monetize the relation between them. And I think many of the audience members tried a lot of more things during that festival than they're normally doing, because they felt that they could do it. And for me, one of the most incredible thing is that we actually did more money with that format. That's what we do on normal, you know, on a more festival. And so it means also that if you're trusting your audience that they're going to give what they can give, it's creating a balance inside also the relation that you have and the engagement that you have between that triangle, you know, the festival, the audience, and the artist. I have a little, I mean, there's so much other things that I think we'll talk about it after, but maybe just two little things before I'm going to show you a bit of the images of the festival and how it felt, I think, during these 10 days. First thing, we also decided to do coffee machines on 5 days of the festival to bring, you know, the artistic community, local community, but also with international partners to have conversations on 5 different topics. The first one was about residencies. The second one was about festivals. The third one was about venues. The fourth one was about the public. And the fifth one was about international mobility. And it was a way to invite friends and colleagues to share a couple of questions that have been written by Bruno Latour, as a philosopher, who is talking about 6 questions to help us, you know, decide what we want to keep from the world that we are living and what we want to transform for, you know, for the next steps. And it's been, I mean, everybody was so generous to just, you know, jump in and have this conversation. We were around, I don't know, between 150 and 200 people each morning together, just to be able to share these thoughts and see how can we face together these challenges, because many of them, in my feeling, are, you know, we're living in a crisis right now, but there's also all the environmental crisis that is just behind. And so sometimes I feel that we are in a rehearsal for some of the challenges that are awaiting us. I think I'm going to stop there right now. And I mean, we're going to talk about what is working. And if you have questions about what is working, what is not working, I'll be super glad to share it with you. I mean, it was for us, the main objective was to experiment and, you know, be a laboratory for the community, for the local one, but also be able to share with colleagues from abroad too. So the little 3 minutes that I'm going to show you, I hope the sound will be good, is really like this format where we try to archive the different experiences of the festival. And I think it's giving quite an idea of the range of possibilities and experiments that we did in these 10 days. So I don't know who's the, there you go.
Ça me fait plaisir de faire votre rencontre, même si celle-ci semble très virtuelle pour l'instant.
Bonsoir, bonjour. La représentation va durer entre 2 et 5 minutes, sans entracte. Bon spectacle.
Malgré cette course folle et effrénée, nous sommes à Noranda. Il n'y a pas eu de visiteur à Noranda depuis au moins 2 ans.
À quel kilométrage du sentier êtes-vous?
À mesure que s'éloigne la France, elle se demande bien où cette aventure va la conduire.
Je me souviens déjà plus de ta peau fraîche qu'on cueille avec le dos de la main. Ça aussi, moi, je peux le faire. On va le faire. On va soulever des masses avec nos mots.
Great, thank you very much for that. It's always lovely to get some kind of a visual impression of what has happened. In fact, in that regard, Kate, are there any images that you might like to share in the chat for people to have a look at?
Yeah, I mean, I could share my screen. I've got a few pictures here, which are mainly of just got a few pictures here I could share, which are images that audience members sent in, you know, of how they were experiencing the festival. Sure. So that they mainly look like this because it's people on a screen. But I think that it's quite nice just in terms of that kind of idea around community and sharing and exchange that I was talking about. So let me just see if I can get some of these up. Yeah. Okay. So they're not edited or anything. There's just a bunch of images that are in a Dropbox. But something that is interesting, Vincent mentioned access, and accessibility was something as well in terms of also being audience members being able to access the work. So we had a BSL, a sign language interpreter at a number of the events, Faye, who's on the screen, me talking to artists, audience members who'd participated in the works, and then kind of sharing their images of them afterwards, images of work that had been made using objects, people waiting for the shows to start in their homes, sharing the countdown, me talking on a screen and someone else, you know, so people got lots of things on the go. They've got their wine at the side, it's ready to go. They've got their feet up, they're watching it on the telly. We're in an after show cocktail party. 14-hour durational performance work by Greg Wohead. So you can kind of get a sense of what the work, someone's cooking their dinner and they've got Greg on the side. So I really like this kind of idea of how the online festival also changes the way that audiences are able to engage. So that's kind of what these images are of, really. We haven't got the fancy video yet, sadly. I'm just going to hold on to this image here briefly, if that's okay, because it's something I didn't talk about, which was something that we really tried to put into the festival and work with artists to make sure was still in place, was this sense of there being something material or tangible around a lot of the work that people were experiencing. And in this piece of work, the artist is up in the corner, Gudrun. She's got an inflatable set in her living room. She's performing the show that she would have performed if she'd been in Gateshead. And in that piece of work, the audience were instructed to bring an ice cube with them as part of the show. And at a certain point, everyone had to hold their ice cubes up. And there was a moment in the show when she brought different people into the show. So mainly it was her performing on the screen on her own, and then we brought people into the screen with her at various points. And there was one very brave audience member who ended up performing quite a lot of the show with her. But there was that sense of kind of having something tangible. So everyone who was on the screen were all holding their ice cubes together, feeling that pain and that joy of the ice melting collectively around the world. So those are sorts of experiences which we're really trying to build in. And there's one more of those that I'll share. So I'll stop sharing my screen and I'll share something material. So there was another project as part of GIFT that involved it involved audiences giving feedback in another way, so not just typing their feedback or using social media. And that was a piece by two artists called Gillian Jane Leese and Adam York Gregory, and they invited people to do something called Telegram This, it was called, and to type up messages that they might want to send. And so people sent in messages digitally, and then they transferred them on a typewriter. And then all those messages have been sent out to all the audience members that they were written for, or all the people around the world that they were written for. So these kind of other ways of working, so trying to kind of keep that sense of the materiality or the tangible, or the sense of just the visceral sense that you get from a festival, trying to find ways of knitting those in amongst the kind of texture of the digital space.
It's so funny because we welcomed Gillian and Adam in residency a year and a half ago about the project with the time, about the watches, and it led some of this conversation inside the way we did it. One other thing, and I'm going to jump on it because I think that's really something interesting about this need for materiality inside a context of digital. And so one of the things that we decided to do is to send a guide to guide for the confined festival to all the people. And so we had a team of volunteers who went by bike to knock on each door of all the people with pass to give them, you know, this little guide. And these connections and these moments were really meaningful in a way for keeping, you know, the care that we wanted to have with the audience. We would have loved to do it all over the world, but unfortunately we stayed only on the island of Montreal. But it was really important moments. And one of the things inside that guide was it's a ritual about in three steps that have been written by an artist, Félix Antoine Boutin, and the idea was to perform that ritual each and every time before the performance that you will do, you know, from distance. And in a way, it was a way for us to propose an action or something tangible that could be shared, you know, by everybody at a shared moment, even though from distance.
Yeah, well, great. Thank you to both of you for that very interesting and stimulating presentations. And very visual as well. So this is the time for people to ask any questions. And if you have any questions, please do let me know in the group chat. And we'll start with Tom Creed. He hasn't put anything there, but I know he has a question.
I do have a question, but I was going to wait for a little while so someone else could do theirs first. And actually, my question is the same question that I asked in the panel this morning, which I'm sort of fascinated by, which is let's assume that there is a vaccine and that you get to do the festivals in something approximating the original conditions next year. Are there things from the digital experience that you will hang on to? Are there discoveries that you've made or there are connections that you've made that you don't want to let go of and you want to take forward into what this better normal is in the future?
Yeah, I mean, Tom, I heard your question this morning and it's something I've been really grappling with a lot, that connection between the kind of local and the international and sort of what we might take forward. So quite a lot of the work at GIFT in previous years has looked like sighted outdoor, site responsive work with audiences who might be what you might now term as socially distanced. So actually in some ways there's already been work that maybe fits that bill. And I might try and find I'll search my computer and see if I can find some images while we're talking, so give some examples. So I feel like in lots of ways, for me to return to work that looks more like that maybe for next year, that's more sort of sighted and it's inviting artists to experiment with site and place and location, and it's experienced by a smaller live audience. But what has been amazing this year that I don't want to lose sight of as well is the sense of GIFT now having that real international element. And somebody who's been to GIFT nearly every year, she said to me as an audience member, she said, what's been really fascinating this year is that I felt part of an international audience community in a way that I never have before. And that was such an extraordinary feeling. And so it's like, how do we keep that as well as kind of keep the local audience? But I've also been grappling with the fact that digital does not mean accessible in any, you know, so those two things, they don't equate actually. And actually in Gateshead, there's a call out at the moment for kind of artists to be making work for communities who are living there who don't have access to digital means at all. So it's like, actually, what other artworks how else can we be working with communities who don't have access to digital technology? So I've been thinking about those things as well. And I've been thinking about, well, if we do get back into Baltic next year and I'm able to kind of program work, but maybe there's a smaller audience experiencing that work in a kind of studio space. So maybe that work is live streamed to an international audience, but maybe it's also live streamed to a local audience. So there's kind of, it's live streamed in some of the other spaces, more interesting places and around the kind of area. And so I've been thinking a lot about this, but I think mainly for me, it's been about that sense of an international community that came together for GIFT this year in a way that hasn't before. And GIFT, I think, because we're a 3-day festival, we're in the northeast of England. I mean, there were so many people from across the UK who came to GIFT this year who'd never been, you know, and that's because of the geography, it's the politics of it. There's a whole load of kind of UK stuff probably in there that I won't go into, but suddenly we had an audience engaging with us in a way that hadn't happened. So I don't want to lose sight of that, but I do want to, and I do want to also just really reflect on what it now means for the local as well. So yeah.
Just in terms of the engagement of the audience, did you do anything proactive to engage the audience in terms of sending out questionnaires, how they felt about it, what they might like to change, what they might like to keep?
Yeah. So we did a questionnaire afterwards, obviously, we sent some out to everyone who'd booked, and we also sent it out through social media, etc. And we got a really quite amazing kind of number of responses, actually, that's given us some fantastic data to work with and ideas. And I'm also starting to kind of hold a series of sort of focus group kind of conversations with people around those ideas and what might work. Or so I want it to feel like it belongs to the community of people who engage with it as well as me.
And what are some of the main themes that have emerged that you found quite interesting from the audience feedback?
Yeah, I think I think that people really felt this sense of community still. So that's been something that I'm trying to dig into more, exactly how they felt that. And there was one comment where somebody said, I won't find the comment. I've got some of the feedback here. It'll just take a while to dig through. I think people are suggesting that we keep a digital strand. That was the feedback mainly, and also in terms of putting it to the artists. So all the artists also complete a survey after they've been part of the festival. And one of the questions that we asked all the artists would you want to be part of GIFT again in Gateshead? And it was 100% yes. And would you want to be part of GIFT again if it was online? And I think again it was 100% yes, or maybe 99% yes. So that sense of it felt like it worked to them, so that's something that I don't want to lose sight of, even though we're now in a very different stage, I think, with this overwhelm of digital, of online. It's overwhelming. There's so much out there. And I don't think I would ever want to run GIFT again in that way entirely, but I don't want to lose sight of it being an element that opens up conversation with a much bigger community. And the thing that we didn't take advantage of or make the most of this year, because I had the commitment to all the artists who were already in the Real World programme, is that I'm really interested in what this way of working allows us to do in terms of programming artists who might not be able to get a visa to perform in the UK, for example, or whom that might be extremely problematic. So who are the artists around the world this now offers you the opportunity to connect with and work with? And that feels like a really exciting thing to be taking forward.
Great, thank you. Vincent, anything that you'd like to say in that regard in relation to Tom's questions and the ones about audience, things that you might have picked up?
I mean, I'm totally agreeing with Kate. I think this connection with local and international have been really important in the way we felt the solidarity inside the festival. And it's still something that we're going to try to continue to work. And I would say in collaboration with the Festival Transamérique too. Two of the things that have been really, for me, eye-opening is the question about how to, adapt to a context. And I think as a small organization that can do that, we felt both a responsibility and a need to be able to challenge the context. And I mean, we always do. It's in our role, but it felt really relevant right this year. And I think this feeling of relevance to be able to adapt is something that we'll try to keep and not make it precarious, but still, be able to always ask ourselves if it's what it means to do that at that exact moment in the context. And the other one would be really about, I mean, it's the opposite of what Kate said. We had a lot of new work inside, the city in different ways, because normally we present mainly inside venues. We have a couple of work, I mean, one or two or maybe three that are outside of standard venues. And this year, because of that, of the context, we really had a couple of them that were really experimenting inside, on site and trying to be, working with on one hand, the mountain that is in the middle of the town of the city called Mont Royal, and on the other way, all the back street of Montreal. And so having, this feeling of being able to both use the different venues, but also really feel that you are connecting with other contexts is something that we'll try to be more aware of in the upcoming years. but I mean, at the same time, it's the challenge for us is that we are responding also to the needs of the artists, because it's a call for application, and so we don't want to deform their work, but it's a good way to think for us to see how we can challenge their work to adapt to different contexts too. So I would say that's the other aspect that we'll try to keep from that edition.
Okay, Julie from Buenos Aires has a comment.
Just to point, it was nice to see the example how the artists were engaging with the audience. We were talking before in the groups, how would be that we have to create these moments to make these online events to feel more alive. And I think I've seen that in your festival, and it's really nice, because if not, it happens that maybe the artist is performing for a screen, and on the other side it seems like you are watching like a movie, but with this interaction it makes more alive, and that is really wonderful.
Yeah, Vincent, I was going to ask, Kate, her festival was ticketed, so people paid. What was the case with your festival?
So, I mean, with the accessible pass, the idea is that when you took the pass, you were you were a festival goer. I mean, you were, as soon as you have that pass, you would receive each and every morning a newsletter with all the way to connect to the different performances. So it was, when I was talking about engagement, it was really a way also to keep that, energy from a festival. So, they had until, I mean, we unveiled the program on different at different moments in the month prior to the festival, to be sure that the works were ready and that we were sure that they will, feel comfortable to do it. And 1 week prior to the festival, we unveiled the total schedule of the festival, and so people were choosing what they wanted to see. And after each and every day, they were just receiving, that schedule and choosing and connecting to the different performances. So it was really, I mean, the format was really about that pass and choosing either if you had money to pay for it or not. And it was really, it was not, I mean, it was not really paying for it, because it was, how do you say that? I'm looking for the word.
Donation?
Yeah, donation. Thank you very much. It was a donation. So people were donating like $25 or $50 to the festival, and so it changed the way we addressed it, because we had no more ticket box office costs. It was really about attending the festival and giving money if you were able to do it.
Yeah, and Mike, just to say that Gift was the same, even though it was ticketed, all the tickets were free to book. And then it was a pay what you decide donation. So audience members, you could attend the whole festival for free. But people...
And how did that work out for you in terms of your business model?
We made more money than we normally would on box office. Significantly more. So...
So the way to go is to have donations in the future, as opposed to charging people ticket prices.
I mean, in a way, for me, it's, I mean, maybe because we are, I don't know if you feel that, Kate, too, but small festival. So the income from the box office were not, I mean, that much at first either. So and so it's been in our mind for a couple of years to see how we could challenge that model. I think for many members of the audience, the question of how much they could give was in a way a much more, and it was a better way to engage the festival, because it was keeping that relation around the idea of risk, testing, experiment, and that's really our mandate.
Mauricio has a question, but I just want to pursue this thing of monetizing the festival. How did if you have sponsors, how did they respond to the festival going online, and what is their attitude to the future of the festival happening in this form?
I mean, on our side, they all the partners decided to continue with us on that journey for that edition. I think it will be a good conversation to have for next year, depending on what will be the format too. But people were really quite surprised even that we were doing something. So they were like really glad to be able, to share. One of the things that I'm expecting, and I don't know how we will react in the next couple of years, is that for all the private, foundation, and I think one of the priority will be, health and education and everything, and I think it will affect us as a community, as an artistic community, and I might be a bit more scared for the upcoming years than this year. I think this year everybody was just trying to be, trying to be in solidarity with the festival.
And on your side, Kate?
Yeah, likewise. I mean, we don't have any commercial sponsors or anything like that, but we have funders. So we were funded by Arts Council England and some other smaller bodies, and the venues and Gateshead local authority council, and everybody was very happy to, it took a lot of conversation back and forth, but everybody was very happy to kind of keep that funding in place. And because it's funded project by project, we had only kind of secured the funding literally weeks before we then had to cancel and go online, so it was all very precarious. But because we're project by project funded, at the moment in England, all of the Arts Council grants that we would normally be applying to have all stopped. So at the moment, we have no idea when that's coming back online. So we have no idea whether there will be an opportunity for there even to be a festival next year. So I'm thinking hypothetically about how I would like the festival to maybe be, or how it might grow and what we might draw on. But the reality is, I don't know whether there's going to be any kind of funding structures in place to really enable it to happen, unless we do something that's very, very grassroots, which we've done before. And so that's unknown.
Great. Okay, Mauricio.
So thank you, Kate. Thank you, Vincent, for this presentation. It's been very insightful. I was able to attend some of the events at GIFT, and I must say that it was very well done. I think the thing for me is that it really made you feel that you were part of a festival, of something special, which was an interesting experience, just seeing it from a screen. And my question to both of you is regarding your audience, regarding your audience outreach. Do you have a way to track who your audiences were? Was it your traditional audience, or were you able to bring in audiences from different places that you wouldn't even know that you could reach out to?
We're going to have the same answer here, I think. But yeah, I mean, yeah, and I mean, in terms of the feedback that we had from the audience feedback, 77% of the audience were new to GIFT, and in terms of the tracking of where those audiences were, they were from, I think, almost 40 countries around the world. So obviously when you're kind of working online, that is the one thing that you do get, is a lot of the data from the sites that you're using in terms of where people are in the world. What you don't get, I suppose, is how many people are necessarily behind each screen. And that was something that came up in the conversation this morning. And it was something that was very clear actually in Gudrun's piece, the piece I showed with the ice cube in your hand, because there was a moment in that show where I think there were maybe 80 people on screen or something, lots of people decided that they wanted to be in it. And then you realize that there were families around one computer, or, or couples or whatever. So you realize that actually when one person has booked a ticket, then that doesn't mean one person, that also means multiple. So that's quite tricky in terms of tracking exact numbers. But in terms of the reach, it was really, really global, with people taking part and people engaging. Yeah, I mean, I've got a list of countries in front of me, but literally all over the world, which was phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost the same thing here. I mean, we're still compiling all the information because it was 2 weeks ago. So we'll see exactly the numbers in the next weeks. But the feeling was really that we had a lot more people from around the world, attending the festival, but because they could be there. One interesting thing is also, how do you, for someone that is looking at a video for 3 minutes, for example, is it part of the audience of the festival? So we're saying that we had like 30,000 people participating in the festival, but on so many different levels. I mean, it's not the same implication when you just listen to a video for 3 minutes, then going in the city, walking around the city. And some of these experiments were a little bit more hard to know. So we know that, for example, 1,000 people downloaded the file to be able to do the performance, but as they went outside to do it, I will never know. But still, we can manage that. With the pass, at least we know that we have like 1,500 people getting the pass, but same thing, we know that a lot of people were many to attend with the same pass in different, spots. So it's quite hard to have the exact tracking, but it for us gives us it was almost like a OFFTA, a normal OFFTA this year for the question of audiences.
Yeah. And so what were some of the reasons why artists chose not to participate?
That's a really good question. So for some of the works, okay, so it was a tricky time also when we decided. One of the good thing was that we could be reactive. So I'm talking with colleagues that the festival is in September. It's harder, to try to imagine what it will be when you have a bit more time. We were really, 6 weeks before the festival, and we knew that if we wanted to do it, it was right now. So at the moment where we had to choose that, it was also a question of having access to help from the government. And the first rule that went out was, if you want to have access to that help, you cannot have income in these months. And so we felt that in a way, to be in solidarity with the artists, we were we were like not helping them to have this money. And it was a real problem about, giving them a little bit of money or, having access for 4 months help from the government here. So, 2 or 3 projects decided just to really wait for next year, because we said to everybody, you'll be able to apply again next year. We'll look out at all the projects together. We cannot assure you that we'll present the work next year, but we'll take them in count. So some of them decided just to have access to that help at that moment. Some of them decided that they will just wait because their piece was not adaptable to the context of an online / in distance festival, and some of them was about really having the time to transform that. So they were saying, I could have done it, but in 6-8 weeks, I don't think it will be a good path for my own practice. And for us, it was really important to hear that and see how we could react to that. The engagement that we made with them was really about, yes, of course, we'll talk about presenting the work next year, but we want also to be there for you throughout the year. So because we have access to spaces where we can give residencies, we'll try to, propose to them time to work in the space and work with them throughout the year also. So it will never be the same thing than exactly presenting that this year, but it's a way for us to use that ecosystem that we have to be able to help them throughout that process.
Kate, any on your side, were the artists who withdrew from the festival?
No, the artists they all took part, but the offer was to do something digital with us this year and then to stay in conversation with us about next year. So really similar kind of model. And, but as I said, we don't know what next year is going to look like. So it might not be viable to bring their work anyway. And, but we'll see. But I want to stay in conversation with those artists about their work and about trying to bring them to Gateshead, and make sure that we can present the work in the real world as well for audiences here. So yeah, but I think everybody took part. And what also happened was, as soon as we announced we were going online, my inbox then filled up with artists emailing me going, I've got this digital piece, I've got this digital piece. But actually the whole purpose of moving online and carrying on with the festival was that it was honouring the artists that I'd made the commitment to in the first place. It was honouring those people and making sure that in this moment of crisis, when suddenly everybody was losing their money, all freelancers that effectively run the whole industry in this country, everyone's jobs and livelihoods were just really thrown up in the air, and continue to be. I mean, this is going to be carrying on for a very long time here. So it felt like an opportunity to kind of to honour that.
Vincent has been speaking about doing things throughout the year. I was just going to ask, has this experience then possibly changed the notion of being a festival as opposed to being some kind of presenting platform that you can do things throughout the year if it's in the digital space?
Yeah, it has for me. I mean, I've always done one-off events throughout the year as a way of kind of keeping GIFT alive. We've always done at least one event sort of 6 months normally in between. But yeah, and we're already kind of talking to artists who have work that they want to put out there, and also use the technology that we invested in to make GIFT happen. So using some of the tech equipment and offering that to artists in our area, our local artists who are interested in experimenting with these kind of platforms, and so sort of making that offer, I suppose, as well. I don't know what it's going to come to yet, but yes, I think that we've sort of built a platform for ourselves through going online this year, that it would be a shame to sort of completely disappear until next year. Yeah. Vincent.
I mean, when we decided 5 years ago to create LASA, it was about really extending, you know, the we felt that we have an expertise in the way we were working with the artists, but 2 weeks each year was not enough, you know, to be able to really implement that way of working, even though, and we had a bit the same model than kids. I mean, we were two at the middle of that, and we were hiring a lot of freelancers. And so we were asking ourselves, how can we, you know, work on a more sustainable way to develop throughout time these relations and different tools. And it helped us to there's some things that we were doing inside the festival a couple of years back and that we are now doing throughout the year. So we really tried to, because it was not the right context to do it. For example, we were doing, in, you know, one of the nights of the festival was about all these young artists coming out of the school. And so these graduating artists were presenting some really short version of a piece that they were working on. And at one point we felt that each year we were rushing that event, and that the connection that we were doing with these artists was not the right one. And so we decided to create that event outside of the festival too, to be able to have, you know, two full weeks of work with them, and to really implement another way of working and have these conversations with them. So it's always for us, that's one of the, I think, strengths of the structure now, is to be able to ask ourselves, is it the right thing to do inside the festival at that moment, or should we do it, you know, elsewhere? And I think it's the same thing for all the digital aspects of it. Can we, you know, was it the only time that we should do it, you know, in the year, the festival, or should we implement that outside of the context of the festival? We'll have, I think, this conversation for the next months.
Well, great, folks. There's still time to ask more questions. I'm just asking questions because I don't see any questions in the chat group here. So, you know, maybe just to pick up on something that we spoke about this morning in the panel as well, was has the experience of going online kind of impacted on the actual form of theatre making or music making or whatever? You know, how is adapting the work that artists have had to present online change the form, or how might it change the form in future? And what is good and bad about that, in your view?
I mean, a lot of the work that we presented have been changed by the context and the format of it. The way they tried to connect with the audience, and also, I mean, the feeling that people were alone. So this, you know, experience of being alone doing stuff, trying to gather with people is quite different than just gathering with people to see something. And so I think it affected a lot the way the artists were trying to create that connection with the audience members. To be totally honest, I don't think it's something that we'll continue to do in that. I mean, adapting the work of an artist for that kind of context is, I think, something that is a great experiment, but it's also really challenging for, you know, the way we work as an organization, but also for the artists, the way you try to connect with the audience. One of the things that I feel that have been really useful in the context and the format is reconnecting with more, you know, analog format. For example, we had one performance on the phone, and it was really another experiment, still keeping that, you know, distance and connection. And so it really helped us to I don't like the word, but reinvent different formats to see which one will be the better for the project. And that relation between the necessity and the format will be, I think, the element that we'll keep from that experience.
Okay.
Yeah, for me, I think, so none of the artists who presented at GIFT had worked in this way before. So they were all kind of taking a big leap. And they all, you know, some of them were more digitally savvy, I suppose, like sort of more used to working this way, even if it wasn't artistically or part of their kind of core creative practice. So they were maybe able to take kind of bigger leaps or, you know, more experimentation than others. But I think that we are in interesting territory at the moment in terms of these different forms that are these hybrid forms and hybrid ways of presenting work that are really emerging. I think that one of the most positive things that's come out of it, I mean, one of the other comments this morning or something else that I think we were talking about before was around, and it was also a key part of GIFT's sort of thematic this year, was around sort of sustainability and the environment as well. And so actually there were a number of works that were created for GIFT that that now have had subsequent lives and have been programmed by other festivals that have gone online since and continue to be. So that's been an amazing thing for those artists who now have the live offer of the work, so they can present the live offer if they're in the same country, and then they now have a digital version which is also ready to go, and the other festivals around the world are booking those. So that's a very, very kind of interesting outcome that we hadn't anticipated. So we thought that artists effectively were translating their work and transposing it for this one-off festival, but actually they now exist as artworks that they're able to carry on performing in other contexts. And I've just seen someone's sharing In Praise of Forgetting by Oliver Zahn. That was a piece that was on the last night of GIFT, and that was a piece that Oliver created just for the kind of online platform. It was a follow-on to a dance work actually, and he made a piece that was just for this this context, but it wasn't a Zoom piece in the sense of seeing faces on screen. It was purely kind of text, and it was extraordinary work. And he's presented that again 3 or 4 times since GIFT in the last, you know, festivals around Germany, and that continues to be picked up. And likewise, I've been in conversation with other festivals around the world about other work that was in the program, a number of other pieces. So that's, and actually there was one piece as well where a lot of people who'd seen the live version in the real world version preferred the digital version. I won't say of what show, but it was interesting for that artist to kind of realize this work lends itself better to this format than it did, and I never would have known that, you know. So that's again a kind of very interesting outcome.
Yep. Well, it is an interesting phenomenon that in a way there has been over the last while a rise in digital arts festivals, and then there've been the analog festivals, and in a way they've kind of been separate. And over what COVID-19 has done is almost forced the analog festivals to go digital. So artists are now, who might have preferred the analog space, have now been obliged to go into the digital space, and now they might need to be creating the same work for both spaces. And hence the question around what does it mean in terms of the form that they're dealing with. I was going to ask you in relation to that as well. Has it kind of impacted by going onto the digital space? Has it impacted on things like the length of work that you can accommodate? Is bandwidth an issue? I know in global South countries it might be an issue. So, you know, you limit what you can basically put online between 1 and 15 minutes. And does how people receive the work or consume the work, does that matter if people are looking at it on the phone as opposed to on a computer or through a computer onto a television screen? How do all of these things kind of impact on the aesthetics of what you present?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so there are things that you cannot have control over in terms of how audiences are experiencing the work necessarily. With every ticket that was booked, the audience member would get an email, and the artist would normally recommend how that piece of work should be experienced, whether it's better off experienced on a desktop or on a phone or whatever, how they would like audiences to experience it. But we also know that during the festival, we were getting feedback from some people saying, you know, oh, my my connection's too slow for this or whatever. So actually there were some things that were beyond our control, but there were other things within the festival. So we had one artist who was performing in a durational work for 14 hours and they didn't have Wi-Fi in their home and they were running the whole show off their phone. So we sort of gave them some extra money to sort of up the bandwidth or whatever, so it was like we were able to do those sorts of things in terms of the infrastructure that we were responsible for as much as possible, but we obviously couldn't be responsible for everyone who was engaging with the work around the world.
I've talked a bit about it earlier, but this guide, when we tried to create that guide for the festival, it was about really this question of how can we give some tools to the audience to experiment the festival in a certain way, to create these moments, these moments of connection. And one of the things that was really important since the beginning for us was about not, putting just stuff online that people could access at any time of the day. So really to choose moments of the day to see, to create these gatherings and these moments of encounter. And that's been really, in a way, it's been quite challenging for people, when you're in your house and at one point you're, oh yeah, I have a show in 5 minutes, that's true, oh, I forgot that one. So that relation to time and space was quite different, but I think that trying to create these tools was a good way for us to propose a context, even though people were left alone and that we didn't really have control over the way they will experience directly the proposals.
So maybe just a final question from me. What happens with Corona fatigue? I think there's been a lot of really positive energy from artists, from audiences, a great deal of sympathy from funders because of this particular moment. Everyone recognizes that in a way it's this existential crisis. And so let's all get in there and support each other and make the best of it. At some point, there's going to be fatigue, donor fatigue and audience fatigue from all the seminars and online kind of platforms that they have. And audiences are going to begin to think, but we've got access to Netflix where the production values are so much better than what we're seeing here. We can, give our sympathy to these artists because shame they really are struggling because the festival can't be provided in the normal form and the like. What are you kind of anticipating in terms of time frameworks? The days of vaccines are not close. So how are you thinking of managing the process from this point till you can go analog again?
That's a really good one. I think my feeling right now is that the 3 last months were totally crazy, and so the Zoom exhaustion that I have right now might be the one that people will have in a couple of months. The team, and it's really an emotional one. It's not, we were talking about, I feel that I've done a festival, even though it was from my little tiny room with my little daughter running around and that kind of, I feel exhausted. But it's really an emotional one that is not really a physical one, and that's really interesting for me because it's another way to be drained, from your energy inside something. For us, the way we work with all the delegate production, so we work with different artists in the delegate production, and the way we are trying to see next year is really to adapt the format of these performances, not online for now, but more to see how we can put the process up front inside that context. And in a way, it's a way to invite the audiences to be able to experience something quite unusual and quite unique in the context. A friend of mine was saying, it's always super hard to do, these solitary works for one audience member and one artist. And for now, that's the only thing that we can do. So we should do, mainly these kind of projects and enjoy the moment that we can, support that kind of work. And I think that in this transition to, to be back to normality in a way, to an analog relation inside a venue, I think we should really explore the city as a space that can be, shared between the artist and the audience, and that kind of relation will never, cannot be replaced by a Netflix production, because it's about experimenting and living the same kind of environment together.
Kate?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like we've already hit a wall with it, to be honest. I personally think that we're already there with this fatigue of kind of everything being consumed this way or experienced this way. And I think that probably what is going to happen is that we've had such a sort of saturation, which has been extraordinary. I suspect that that's going to start to wane, maybe. And but I that's just personal. I don't know. I mean, it's interesting because there's festivals going on right now. I've just had a reminder pop up saying I'm supposed to be going in to watch a show at 8:30 p.m. At Migration Matters Festival here in the UK to celebrate Refugee Week. So there's just it's non-stop. But I think that there's probably going to hit a time when people are going to start to go, I don't have capacity to engage actually anymore with this to the same extent as I did, which I think is why our timing was really quite we were very lucky, I think, for GIFT. I think we were really lucky in terms of the timing of the festival.
Yeah. Well, talking of fatigue, there are some people on this platform now who have been here since at least 7 o'clock this morning. Tom, Zephyr, of course, all the usual suspects, Yannick and Inge and the like, and people like Angela. And so, yeah. And so thank you very, very much for being with us. But just to say to Vincent and Kate, that's been very stimulating, and thank you very much for sharing those experiences with us. And I think we've learned a lot from you. I'm going to hand over to Inge, maybe just to bring this to a close. But from my side, thank you very, very much, both to you as participants and to you as the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having us. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mike, also for facilitating a panel at 7 in the morning and now at 7 in the evening. We've crossed 12 hours. Fatigue is indeed hitting us, but tomorrow we can start at least a little bit later, so that's good news. Thank you very much, Kate and Vincent, for sharing with us. It's really, together with the panel of this morning, I think we got a very diverse insight in what it means to go digital. And we are also experiencing, it is as if this is also a virtual festival. So there's so many things that we recognize, I think. So to be short, tomorrow we are here again at 10 Central European summertime for the keynote of Lemi Bonifacio, New Zealand artist, who will talk about what it means to be human from a perspective of, he works a lot with indigenous culture, and his work also relates to climate change. So it will be very inspiring again, I think. So see you all tomorrow.
Get some sleep, y'all. Cheers. Bye.
Thank you, Yannick. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, audience. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.